What if I told you the only reason Journey still exists is because one man refused to let it die? Breakups, walkouts, lawsuits, every era of this band came close to total collapse. But through it all, Neal Schon'S never left. While everyone else walked away, he fought alone to keep the music alive. And the battles he survived behind the scenes are more shocking than anything the public ever saw. The Last Man Standing. Before Journey became a stadium-shaking rock force, they were something completely different. In 1973, the band was a jazz fusion experiment born from the musicianship of former Santana members and young guitar prodigy Neal Schon'S. Their early music was complex, technical, and far from what would eventually make them famous. But even then, Neal saw potential no one else did. He believed Journey could be bigger, much bigger, if they shifted toward melody and emotion. That transformation began slowly. Albums like Infinity marked the change, pulling Journey closer to the rock identity fans know today. But evolution came with consequences. Founding keyboardist Greg Rowley stepped away in 1980, worn out from years of relentless touring. Drummer Steve Smith left in the mid-80s as the band's creative direction changed again. And then came the turning point. Steve Perry, the voice that helped launch Journey into global superstardom, stepped back in 1987 due to burnout, and later again in the late 90s after health issues. Piece by piece, the classic lineup dissolved, and yet one person remained constant, Neal Schon'S. While others left for personal reasons, health struggles, or new paths, Neal refused to walk away. Journey wasn't just another band to him. It was his life's work, his identity, and the one thing he believed still had more to offer. Inside the industry, doubts grew louder. Without Perry, many questioned whether Journey could continue at all. Some believed the band's story had reached its natural end. But Neal saw something different. To him, Journey didn't belong to one era or one singer. It belonged to generations of fans around the world. Still, staying came with a heavy burden, and the moment Perry stepped away, the biggest clash of Neal's career was set in motion. And that conflict would change Journey forever. The fracture with Steve Perry. By the early 80s, Journey had become one of the biggest bands in America, and much of that success centered on the chemistry between Neal Schon'S' guitar-driven fire and Steve Perry's soaring, unmistakable voice. On stage, they looked unstoppable. Behind the scenes, their visions slowly drifted in different directions. Neal wanted to keep the band rooted in rock energy, while Perry leaned toward polished, radio-friendly ballads. The two approaches created magic, but also tension. After years of touring, recording, and carrying the weight of global fame, Perry hit a wall. By 1987, he was exhausted, emotionally drained, and physically worn down. He stepped away from the band, hoping distance would give him clarity. For Neal, who had fought to keep Journey evolving from day one, the pause felt dangerous. Momentum mattered, and the longer they waited, the harder it would be to reignite the spark. The band eventually reunited for Trial by Fire in 1996, and the album became a commercial success. A tour was planned until Perry suffered a serious hip injury while hiking in Hawaii. Doctors recommended surgery. Perry hesitated. He wanted time. Neal feared that waiting again would leave Journey frozen in limbo. Without a timeline from Perry, the tension exploded. What followed wasn't a dramatic firing, but a painful divide. The band had to move forward, and Perry wasn't ready. Fans didn't see the private conversations, the emotional pressure, or the impossible choices. Some blamed Neal, others blamed Perry, but the truth was far more complicated. Both cared about the band, just in different ways. And once Perry stepped aside, the responsibility of holding Journey together landed entirely on Neal's shoulders. What Neal didn't anticipate was how much harder things were about to get, because rebuilding Journey without its iconic frontman came with battles he never expected, and those battles would reshape the band's future. Rebuilding a broken band. When Steve Perry stepped away, most bands would have called it quits. Journey had already lived through a decade of chart-topping success, and many in the industry believed the story had reached its final chapter. But Neal Schon'S wasn't one of them. Instead of letting the band fade, he began searching for a way to rebuild it from the ground up. The 1990s were a whirlwind for him. While Journey sat on uncertain ground, Neal threw himself into new projects, Bad English, Hardline, and countless collaborations, proving he wasn't waiting around for permission to keep creating music. But even with those successes, one truth kept pulling him back. Journey wasn't finished, not as long as he was still standing. The long-awaited 1996 reunion for Trial by Fire was supposed to restore the band's future. The album performed well, earning critical praise and commercial success. But without a tour, the momentum died instantly. When Perry's hip injury delayed everything indefinitely, Neal faced a brutal choice: pause the band yet again or move forward with a new lineup. It was a decision that fractured relationships and divided fans for years. By 1998, Perry was no longer part of the group, and drummer Steve Smith also exited. Neal pushed ahead, determined to prove Journey could survive. The band continued with new singers and new energy, but rebuilding came with constant pressure. Fans who grew up with Perry often resisted change. Critics questioned whether Journey could stay relevant, and every time the lineup shifted, the scrutiny landed directly on Neal. Still, he refused to stop. He protected the band's name, kept it touring, and kept searching for the voice that could lift Journey into a new era. But the greatest turning point was still ahead, and it would begin with a grainy YouTube video that changed everything. Because the singer who would save Journey wasn't even on Neal's radar yet. The Arnel Pineda discovery. By the mid-2000s, Journey was still touring, still drawing crowds, but something essential was missing: a voice that could carry the band into a new era. Neal Schon'S felt that pressure more than anyone. He had tried multiple vocalists, each talented in their own way, but none fully captured the blend of strength, emotion, and range that defined Journey's legacy. Behind the scenes, some believed the band had already peaked and would never find a singer who could bridge the past and the future. Then, late one night in 2007, Neal stumbled onto a YouTube video that stopped him cold. It was a Filipino singer named Arnel Pineda performing Journey covers with a tiny band in Manila. The video quality wasn't great. The stage was small, but the voice, clean, powerful, expressive, sounded like it could fill an arena. Neal replayed the clip over and over, convinced he had just found something extraordinary. But not everyone agreed. Bringing in a frontman discovered online from halfway across the world was a massive gamble. Some people close to the group worried fans wouldn't accept a singer so far removed from the band's original story. Others doubted whether anyone could survive the pressure of stepping into one of rock's most iconic roles. Neal ignored the doubts. He contacted Arnel, invited him to audition, and from the first rehearsal, the chemistry was undeniable. Yet Arnel's journey wasn't easy. He faced intense scrutiny, cultural barriers, and harsh online comments questioning whether he belonged. Through all of it, Neal stood behind him. He defended Arnel publicly and privately, insisting that talent, not birthplace, defined a true frontman. And when Journey finally hit the stage with Arnel, the reaction was electric. The band was reborn. But while the music reached new heights, the peace inside the band didn't last. Because Journey's next conflict wouldn't come from fans. It would come from inside the band itself. Neal versus Jonathan Cain. The Silent War. For years, Neal Schon'S and Jonathan Cain were the creative backbone of Journey. Neal drove the band's sound, while Cain shaped its polished melodies and arena-sized anthems. Together, they wrote some of the biggest rock hits of the 1980s. But as Journey entered its modern era, the partnership that once fueled their success slowly began to fracture. The trouble didn't erupt overnight. It built quietly. Two different worldviews, two different priorities, and two leaders who no longer saw the band's future the same way. Cain's life began moving in a new direction after he married into a high-profile political family, while Neal remained focused on touring, recording, and pushing the band forward. Their personal paths drifted further apart, and the tension seeped into the music and the business. By the early 2020s, their disagreements spilled into the public. Court filings revealed disputes over financial access, band credit cards, and control of the group's corporate structure. Neal claimed he was being restricted from accounts tied to Journey's operations. Cain countered with his own accusations. The legal back and forth made headlines, and fans were stunned. Journey had survived breakups, rotating lineups, and decades of change. But few expected the core songwriting duo to end up on opposite sides of a courtroom. For Neal, the fight wasn't just about money, it was about the band's identity. He believed Journey needed to stay rooted in music, not politics, distractions, or internal power struggles. For Cain, it was about protecting what he felt was stability and structure. The conflict reached a point where it threatened the band's very existence. Tour plans grew tense, communication broke down, and the partnership that once created Don't Stop Believin' became a battleground. And yet, through all the legal noise, all the headlines, and all the private friction, Neal refused to let Journey collapse. But holding the band together came with a cost, and the weight of that responsibility was heavier than ever before. The burden of the legacy. By this point, Journey wasn't just a band, it was a machine, a business, a brand recognized on stages across the world. And at the center of that machine was Neal Schon'S. While other members came and went, Neal carried the pressure of protecting the music, the name, and the legacy. Even the legal trademarks tied to Journey's identity were held through a company he and Jonathan Cain jointly controlled, meaning every disagreement, creative or personal, instantly became a business issue too. It was a responsibility Neal never asked for but couldn't walk away from. Every lineup change fell on him. Every fan backlash, every tour decision, and every dispute, public or private, came back to his leadership. To most people, Journey looked stable from the outside, playing sold-out shows across the world. But inside, Neal was navigating constant challenges, contracts, lawsuits, disagreements, and the emotional fallout of decades spent fighting to keep the band alive. Some nights fans only saw the smiles on stage. They didn't see Neal spending hours handling legal filings before stepping into the spotlight. They didn't see the weight he carried from being the one constant in a story filled with departures. And they didn't see the strain of balancing the band's history with the demands of its future. Through it all, Neal never slowed down. Even when criticism came from fans comparing every new singer to Steve Perry, even when legal disputes exploded into headlines, even when internal tension nearly split the band in half, he kept going. Because to Neal, Journey wasn't an old chapter, it was an ongoing story. And despite the battles behind the scenes, the world still filled arenas to hear the music. That alone kept Neal fighting. But the question remained, after decades of conflict, what kept him pushing forward when everyone else had stepped away? Why Neal never walked away. After 5 decades of non-stop battles, creative splits, departures, lawsuits, public pressure, most musicians would have stepped back and protected their peace. But Neal Schon'S isn't built like most musicians. For him, Journey was never just a job or a chapter of his youth. It was the one constant that shaped his entire life, from the moment he joined Santana at 15 to the day he helped form Journey at just 19. Every time the band fractured, people assumed Neal would eventually burn out. But instead, he doubled down. When Steve Perry left, Neal kept the music going. When critics said the band couldn't survive without its classic voice, he found Arnel Pineda and rebuilt the legacy for a new generation. When the legal disputes with Jonathan Cain erupted, Neal didn't walk away. He went straight into the storm to defend what he believed the band stood for. What truly kept him going wasn't ego or stubbornness. It was a connection. Neal always said Journey belonged to the fans, the millions who sang the songs long after the original members separated. Every time he stepped on stage and heard a stadium roar to "Don't Stop Believin'," he was reminded why he fought so hard to keep the band alive. Even now, Neal tours relentlessly, playing with the same intensity he had as a teenager. And while the lineup around him has changed again and again, his belief never wavered. Journey's story didn't end in the 80s. It didn't end when Perry left. And it won't end as long as there's an audience waiting to hear the songs. For Neal, the battles were never the point. The music was. And that music still echoes around the world because one man refused to let it fade. In the end, Journey didn't survive because things were easy. It survived because Neal Schon'S refused to let it die. Through breakups, departures, lawsuits, pressure, and decades of uncertainty, he kept the band alive when every sign pointed to the end. Journey's story is a reminder that legacy isn't luck. It's fought for, protected, and carried forward by people who refuse to give up. And whether you credit Steve Perry, Arnel Pineda, Jonathan Cain, or anyone else who shaped the Journey, the truth is simple. Journey exists today because Neal never walked away. If you felt this story, hit like, tap subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss another deep dive from Backstage Melody. Your support keeps these stories alive, just like Neal kept Journey alive.